On the left side of Groove Agent 1, we have the master volume at the bottom. Just above that, we have 4 buttons. Click play for now. When play is selected, the knobs above are the exact same ones you'll find in voice, filter, and amplifier. Of course, voice, filter, and amplifier have more knobs within their sections, but this cutoff knob in the play section is the exact same knob in the filter section. In fact, the values are the same when I move the knob in either section. The play section contains a selection of knobs from the other sections for quick editing. Looking above in the same display window, it tells us how many pads have samples on them and how many samples are being used. You might be thinking, well, shouldn't they be equal? Not necessarily, since a single pad can have up to 8 samples layered on top of it. We'll cover this in a second. The size is the amount of megabytes that your samples take up in memory, and the polyphony tells you how many voices are being played at a time. There's a little slider at the very top of the display window that allows you to change the contrast of the display. Move it left and right until you find a good setting. Since the knobs in play mode are copies of the other sections, let's go straight into explaining those other sections. Select Voice. At the top, we have a little trash can. If you ever need to erase a sample from Groove Agent 1, then drag it onto the trash can. Make sure that you don't drag a sample from Group 3, since we need Group 3 for this video. Press Group 3 and hit play in Cubase. Now press the MIDI indicator beside the trash can. Notice that the pads are being selected by the MIDI notes as Cubase plays. Now press the MIDI indicator again. The pad doesn't change now in the display. Press stop. Whatever pad is green is the one that's being edited. Just below the trash can, you'll see the word Layer 1. Open the mini browser. Add a couple sounds to a pad. Now I'm just adding any sounds here, but a practical use for velocity layering is when you want a snare to play soft sounds at low velocities and harder, whacking sounds at maximum velocity. You can see that I have multiple layers now instead of one layer. Click on the pad from low to high and see and hear the layers change. When you click on a layer, you can see what sound is on that layer and the velocity switch it has. This is the velocity or volume at which it changes to the next sample, depending on how hard you press the pad, or the velocity of the MIDI note. You can even click on the line between layers and move the velocity mapping to whatever you like. You can do coarse and fine-tuning adjustments and even change the volume of each layer. Since there are a lot of knobs here, you'll need to brush up on some of the features in the manual, but I'll point out a few more of the most useful ones. Mode is used for playing the sound forwards or in reverse. TR mode is for allowing the sample to play completely from start to finish by setting it to one shot, or allowing the MIDI note to determine when it will end by the length of the MIDI note by setting it to key hold. Meaning, if you have a long sample but only want to play half of it, you set it to key hold. And for as long as you hold down the key on your MIDI keyboard, the sound will play. Let's say only half of the length of the sample. Output can be used when you are using Groove Agent 1 on an instrument track. You'll need to use VST instruments for this to work. This feature is explained in Level 4 of this tutorial series in a video called Multi-Timbral Instruments. In the filter section, you'll be using type and cutoff often. Type is the type of filter that you apply to the sample, and the cutoff is the filter cutoff frequency. Let's explain this with an example. Press play in Cubase and click the tiny M on all of the pads except for the hi-hat and the kick drum. This mutes the pads. Now click on the hi-hat pad so it turns green. Now go to play and set the volume all the way up. Go to the filter section and change the type to BP for bandpass. Now move the cutoff to create a sweeping filter effect. This can be automated if needed. Automation is discussed in a few chapters. Now let's unmute all of the pads we just muted. The amplifier section adjusts volume, pan, attack, and release of your samples. Like I said before, we skipped over a few knobs here, but you can dive deeper into the manual to get all the details. Before we close off this chapter, I want to show you what Exchange does. In its simplistic form, it can load up Akai MPC PGM files, which is awesome in itself. However, you can perform a really neat feature here. Load up the project called Groove Agent 1.2 Exchange. I have a drum beat that I'm going to slice up, drop into Groove Agent 1, and then extract MIDI file information out of it for our MIDI track. Let's listen to our drum beat. Double-click it to open the sample editor and make sure the Hit Points tab is open. Move the threshold until you can see all of the hits marked by hit points, and then press Create Slices. Press OK when Cubase asks you to turn off the musical mode. Highlight the audio part and choose Dissolve Part from the audio menu. Now click on the instrument track above and press the Edit Instrument button to call up Groove Agent 1. Click and drag all the audio events on the project page over to Groove Agent 1. The Exchange light lights up now. Now drag from the Exchange arrow window to the project page. A new track gets created. You can use this new track, but since we already have a track above, just move the MIDI information that we dragged out of Groove Agent 1 and place it up in the first instrument track. To make sure you don't move the event out of time, hold down the controller command key while you move it. Let's delete the other track and mute the audio track. We've essentially ripped this beat apart, and we're now retriggering the individual samples that make up the loop with MIDI note information. This way we can play the slices back at any tempo. Now go ahead and play Cubase and see your results. Awesome! From here, you can adjust the filter, change the volume, move the panning around of the individual pads, and really bring this drum loop to life.